tokens deck. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because that deck does look pretty sweet.
Yeah, he has 4 Lingering Souls, he has 3 Advent of the Worm, 4 Selesnya Charm, 2 Ready and Willing, which is a pretty cool card, not one I expected to see sleeved up today.
Yeah.
2 Sorin Lord of Innistrad. So that's what he has for his token makers.
And then a lot of intangible virtues, playing all 4. The Celestia Charms, double as ways to exile gigantic creatures, as well as, pump things in combat to mess up that. But he has a lot of removal spells, actually. He has 3 Putrefy, 2 Oblivion Ring, and 3 Abrupt Decay, as well as 3 Tragic Slip. So he's got a ton of removal, and unfortunately for him, it's going to be mostly dead against Chihoi. So I actually think Chihoi is favored in this match, but I'm ready to go when they are. So, all right, so it looks like Scott's taking a mulligan here, so let's slow this down. Can we see who is on the play? Who won the die roll?
I think it was Chihoi, just from how they're acting pre-game, but we'll get some confirmation from you.
Sure.
For you.
Well, Scott was kind of looking off to the side, but I think he was just thinking about his hand more than anything, perhaps, but not sure.
Yeah, not where
right,
Scott
is on the play, actually.
Oh, wow,
so.
Okay. So Scott Bassham, on 6 cards, on the play.
I read him right.
Whoa, look at this. I just noticed this. Main deck, 62 cards.
62 cards. So a little J-Way special going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A 62-carder. Inspiration from Pete Chapin, maybe, too.
So for those of you who don't know, there's a character on Magic Online. His name is J-Way, and I forget his name in real life, but for a pretty reasonably long period of a PTQ season, he played a Scapeshift deck that played 65 cards. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but I just thought that was going to be interesting. So Chihoi on the play, leading off with all of his colors, which is good. He has access here to, maybe some Renounce the Guild should Scott play anything that he wants to kill, like a Voice of Resurgence, but wouldn't really do that on my opponent's turn. I think Voice of Resurgence is actually going to be the most important card for Scott against Chihoi, since it does allow him to force Chihoi to main phase all of his stuff, makes his Plasm Captors much worse, makes things like Alchemist's Refuge terrible, makes Sphinx Revelation you have to main phase it, so you have to discard back down to 7. So yeah, Chihoi here far-seeking for his black source, so he can potentially start using the Folly Drownyard in a few turns.
Yep. So right now he's just setting up. He's happy to ignore that Voice of Resurgence for now. Just treat it as a vanilla 2/2. He'll deal with it when he's ready to.
Yep. And this was a turn 3 Farseek from Chihoi, so he does play a land post-combat. Scott on 3 lands. Let's see, probably maybe cast a Lingering Souls here or something. Again, yep, there's the Lingering Souls from Scott. But again, Scott does have a ton of removal spells in his deck, and they're just not going to do anything against Chihoi. I mean, even Abrupt Decay, which normally would have more targets, as well as Putrefy, like, the only target for those, really, is Snapcaster Mage, Augur of Bolus, and Elixir of Immortality, which can just shuffle in, itself. The Jace Memory Adept dodging everything except for Oblivion Ring from Scott, as well as some attacks. But here comes Urban Evolution for Chihoi, and this is really just going to get the juice flowing. So he has already played 1 land for a turn, so he's probably going to follow it up with a Temple Garden or, another tapped land.
And if you don't know Urban Evolution, it's 5-mana sorcery, draw 3, and you can play an extra land. So really powerful in this Turbo Fog-ish deck.
Draw 3, 1 Explore?
Yeah.
Not 2?
Only 1.
Only 1. All right, so going to battle here for 4, probably Flashback Lingering Souls. Oh, it just doesn't play anything. All right, so that means more than likely he's got Celestial Charm or something, or he just doesn't want to... Ooh, wow. Chihoi Miracle's a Terminus off the top. That takes care of the Voice of Resurgence and all the tokens.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Perfect for Chihoi.
Yeah.
Supreme Verdict, way worse than Terminus in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, now, since it does put on the bottom and doesn't send the Voice of Resurgence to the graveyard, that means that Scott doesn't get a token out of the deal. So now he's stuck with just 3 lands and not a whole lot to do. And Chihoi's got, Nefali Drownyard active, Alchemist's Refuge active, and just a ton of cards in hand. This game might take a while to win, but it's going to be very hard for Scott to come back out of this. So, Chihoi now has Plasm Capture in his hand, so it looks like he's just sitting pretty.
Wow, I don't think he has blue, green, green. Okay, that's why.
Okay.
He Snapcasters, flashes back the Urban Evolution, draw 3 more, play another land, and Chihoi just pulling way out in front here.
Yeah, I mean, when one person has 9 lands in play and the other person only has 3, it's usually pretty easy to figure out who's advantaged. You know, Scott does draw another Voice of Resurgence here, which could pose a little bit of a problem for Chihoy, but he does have that other Terminus in hand. So looks like Chihoy sitting in pretty complete control here. You know, he's at a reasonably low life total at 12, but there's a Sphinx of Revelation right off the top, and that's going to pad his life total probably out of range from Scott's deck.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Chihoy Yim's hand is stocked. Wow, Scott goes for the trade.
Block.
Right
Yeah,
there.
that's interesting. I mean, this actually just turns on his Supreme Verdict now, which that's what Chihoy is going to go ahead and cast here, I believe. And now he can just save his Terminus for a later Voice of Resurgence, you know, or something like that. So, you know, Chihoy's hand pretty stocked. He's got a Plasm Capture, Sphinx of Revelation. So if he's able to Plasm Capture the next big spell from Scott, untap and Sphinx of Revelation for a literal billion.
Yep. And Mana Drain comes down on the Sorin.
Yep.
Green, green, blue, blue. Fixed casting cost Mana Drain.
Yeah, you know, just added two more colors, or no, sorry, added an extra color and made it cost 2 more. It's fine. We'll just let that one go.
Playable standard card now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it in too many lists, even like, you know, ban control lists, but it seems like it's very good in Chihoy's deck where it's so mana hungry with things like Urban Evolution, Terminus, and then the Sphinx of Revelation, which is the biggest draw for it. I think one of the coolest things you can do with the Plasm Capture is it makes your Snapcaster Mage on Sphinx's Revelation into a relevant Sphinx's Revelation, whereas normally it'd be a lot smaller than your traditional Sphinx Revelation because it does cost 2 extra mana to get started. But I wouldn't be surprised here if he just does it for like the full billion.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so it looks like with the 4 he has floating, he's going to add another 4 to that, maybe draw 5 cards. He just wants to get his mana right.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I would just draw a lot. I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to draw into Jace and cast it.
I think he might need another blue mana for that. We'll make sure he taps right for that.
No, Plasm Capture allows you to add any color, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So, Chihoy there. Just drawing, I believe, 5 cards. Sphinx Revelation for 5. 4 mana from the Plasm Capture, countering the Sorin. Tapping 4 more to do that. Yeah, I mean, his hand, he's got Terminus. He's got some Renounce the Guilds, which, since he saw the Sorin out of Scott's deck, he probably assumes is much better than it actually is. Honestly, the only things it really deals with is Voice of Resurgence kind of poorly, and then the Sorins. But yeah.
Yeah, that's actually it. Chihoy, you know, the more I look at his deck list, the more I'm really impressed with all his numbers. The 1 Elixir seemed out of place. The 1 Fog seemed out of place. But when you think about it, the Elixir lets him loop infinitely with the Urban Evolutions. If they do deal with the Jace, it just lets him shuffle it back in. It's just a great deck here. I really like it.
Chihoy here, rightly keeping his Celestial Charm in hand instead of discarding it to the big revelation from earlier, now has a way to actually deal with this Advent of the Worm token. And I think he may have made a small mistake. I might have chosen to Celestial Charm it while Scott was tapped out, just in case he had something like a Rootborn Defenses or some other populate effect at instant speed.
Right.
But it looks like here Chihoy is actually just going to Alchemist Refuge into Terminus, and that's going to take care of both threats, leaving Scott with just a 3/3 token, but Chihoy at 17 with 2 more Sphinx Revelation in hand. This is pretty far gone, I believe.
Yeah, Scott's deck, I mean, we're looking at it. What can he draw to get back into this?
Well, it's certainly not Putrefy.
Not Putrefy, not Oblivion Ring, not Tragic Slip, not Abrupt Decay, not Ready Willing. This is just a nightmare matchup for Scott Bassham.
Yeah, so, I mean, Chihoy even has a Renounce the Guilds in hand to deal with this Sorin. So, it's a little unfortunate for Scott that Chihoy randomly drew Renounce the Guilds while he just, drew his 2 Sorins. When, normally Sorin would be very good against Chihoy, or the Renounce the Guilds would be very bad. They just, happen to, butt heads, and Scott's going to be on the receiving end.
So Scott makes an emblem with Sorin, maybe a little wary of what happened last time.
Yeah, I mean, he knows he's just going to get, destroyed by multiple Wrath effects. Here comes a big Sphinx Revelation, just going to dig for Jace and Elixir of Immortality to put the game away. Not really afraid of the damage coming at him since he does just have a handful of insane cards. So
Chihoy draws 9 cards with his Sphinx's Revelation.
Just
gains 9 life.
Is that good?
That's okay. The discard step still exists, so...
Yeah, He only has 47 mana to cast things before he has the discard. So renounce the guilds to take care of the Sorin. It looks like he has a Snapcaster in hand, but I don't think he has the Jace. But there's a big clump of cards in there that I can't really see. So yeah, Farseek probably doesn't have the Jace at the ready. Still digging. Still got 2 more Sphinx Revelations to find it. So
yep, Chihoi's deck does have a couple dissipates in it for counter magic. So even if Scott had some kind of crazy large game-changing threat, Chihoi,
like Tristani Summoner or
Sway the Stars. I don't know. I don't know what Scott needs.
Oh man,
at this
I
point.
watched that Pro Tour back in the day when Sway the Stars was in block constructed for Kamigawa block. That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, man. That card was so sweet.
That was a lot of fun.
Yep.
It was the Heartbeat of Spring into float, 10 mana, Sway the Stars,
Oh yeah.
untap, mana burn.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got a mana burn for 8, you know.
So Chihoi goes into his discard step after playing a few spells, discards the lands, the extra Farseeks, stuff like that, and is left with only the cream of the crop.
I feel like it's story time because I feel like it's going to take forever for Chihoi to win. All right, so I was talking about Jayway earlier. All right, so Jayway is a character on Magic Online. Always plays kooky decks or kooky versions of certain decks. But for a while, Scapeshift was like a pretty big deck in 4-year extended, and that was when we had 4 blocks to build with for extended decks. And you know, most people who played Scapeshift, they either played Prismatic Omen or they played just green-red, and they had a ton of mountains.
And you couldn't really do both.
You couldn't really do both. And the decks that played the Prismatic Omens didn't have very many basic mountains at all in them because they just relied on the 2-card combo of Prismatic Omen and Scapeshift. But Jayway actually figured out something, and this is something he actually was made fun of for a long time, even though I think that it was pretty much genius. But he ended up playing 65 cards so that he could fit enough mountains into his deck to also be able to Scapeshift kill people, as well as be able to beat them with Prismatic Omen. And it was interesting because he took the middle route, but in order to do so, he had to play more than 60 cards because he just couldn't fit all the cards into the shell.
Right.
So it was interesting, and I really liked his arguments for that. But it was just odd to see so many people, you know, jump on the bandwagon of this guy's bad or whatever when he actually, I think he was very good. But Chihoi here, we'll go back to the match. You know, Chihoi's doing some stuff. Sphinx Revelation for most of his deck. Gonna play the Elixir of Immortality. Go to discard step, discard, you know, all of his cards that are bad, which is not very many.
Right. At this point, Chihoi has multiple counter spells in hand. I think 3 counters in hand, a Snapcaster in hand. He has a removal spell. This game is done.
And it's funny. I think he has a Jace in the bottom like 5 cards of his deck.
Yeah,
so.
he does. So he has to let that elixir just sit there until he draws his Jace.
Yep. I mean, well. All right. So now, what he can do here. Well, actually, this is interesting. So Chihoi's already moved to the discard step, and then Abrupt Decay's coming down against the Elixir. So I guess they're just sort of backing up a little bit because Chihoi was just discarding and didn't really announce his discard phase or whatever. So he's going to activate the Elixir. I'm kind of surprised. I think he has another Revelation hand. I'm kind of surprised he didn't Revelate for 3 or 4 to try to draw into the Jace before he shuffled. But I guess he's content just going for the long game with a handful of stuff and just doesn't really care. So.
Right, and he'll go into his discard step. He's actually happy to get all those cards into the graveyard. He doesn't want those
extra lands.
Farseeks, lands.
Doesn't want all that
deck.
stuff into his deck.
It looks like that's a Nephalia Drownyard pile, and Chihoi might finally start milling his opponent here.
Needed to get up to 32 live. Needed to draw his whole deck
before
he starts killing his opponent. So
right, doesn't want to tap down below 3 counter spells.
Yeah.
That would be.
Honestly, if I were Scott, I would be concerned with a time issue here. I think he's at a point where he's probably ready to give up, but it's unfortunate that it just takes so long for these control decks with Nephalia Drownyard to actually kill the opponent. Once your opponent plays the Sphinx Revelation for 9 and you have no creatures in play, I think it's safe to assume that the game is basically over. So.
And here's a Farseek off an Augur of Bolas. Let's see how many lands he has left. Oh, he's not going to show us, but it didn't look like many.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a few discard steps where he Sphinx's Revelation for a large number and discard a few lands. So he's probably got around 5 or 6 lands left in the deck. Maybe a few more since he did have like 5 cards left before he reshuffled. So Chihoi did mill over some Lingering Souls. looks like Scott's just flashing or casting one from hand, not really flashing any back. At this point, though, Chihoi's at a lot of life. I know that he's trying to play around Supreme Verdict from Scott's side, obviously, but I mean, you can't really do that when your opponent just has the perfect 7 at every point in the game, you know.
Right. And, you know, I want to touch back on what you said a few turns ago, how you'd be really worried about time. I mean, I would be too. Scott Bassham, he has 4 power and no relevant cards in hand. How can he possibly hope to win this game? He can't even beat the Nephalia Drownyard with his clock right now.
Agreed. And maybe that's something that more inexperienced players aren't really aware of when it comes to time issues for tournaments. You know, it's not always how fast you play or how slow you or your opponent play. A lot of times it just has to do with how quickly your deck can win or your opponent's deck can win. And if your opponent is a slow deck where their only win condition is Nephalia Drownyard, you know, it's a little awkward to just sit there with like very little pressure. Your opponent's at well over 20 life, and you know, you're not really progressing your board or anything. You know, you have to make the decision where you're either going to go all in for your last couple lingering souls and hope he just randomly doesn't have another Supreme Verdict or something, or you just concede. And I think both those are fine options, but he's taking the middle route of not applying pressure and not conceding when Chihoi has an obvious, you know, lock with being able to draw his deck every turn with the Elixir of Immortality and Sphinx's Revelation. Like, it's just not close. There's no reason really to keep going.
Here's a Farseek from Chihoi. Any lands left? One land left. That's the last land in his deck, I think. Unless, one more after
he's Farseeking again, so hopefully he just looks. So hopefully there's
hopefully
another
he doesn't
one.
get a game loss for no shuffling. We'll see.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, he was still casting the Farseek. He was resolving a spell. Chihoi, a pretty tight player. I mean, I could understand at this point just like maybe, you know, playing a little loosely just because you have the game locked up. You never want to give your opponent a way to get back in the game, but at this point, I don't think there is. And he's actually just playing faster and doing shortcuts to save time, just in case they do end up going to a game 3.
Right. He knows that Scott is not the type to scoop when he.
I mean, clearly Scott's not the type to scoop. You know, when the game's locked up. You know, I mean, and that's no disrespect to Scott in any way. Like, people, like, a lot of times they'll just keep playing until they're actually dead, because that's just how people like to play Magic. And I'm perfectly okay with that. You know, make your opponent kill you. You know, there's a reason they make 50-minute clocks. You know, you want your opponent to be able to kill you in that time frame. But a lot of times you have to recognize when you need to try to win, and if that involves you conceding a game for time purposes, then that's fine.
Yeah, for sure. And if I was Scott, I would have conceded a few turns before he did, but no big deal. They still have 32 minutes left on the clock. So Scott will be on the play for game 2. Let's talk about his sideboard options.
Sure. All right. So he's definitely going to be taking on a ton of those removal spells. A couple of glaring spotlights. I don't think that's going to be doing too much. Crypt Incursion, not really. The big ones, I think, being Sin Collector and Rootborn Defenses, and he does have 3 of both of those, and those 2 are going to let him side out the Putrefies and the Abrupt Decays, basically 6 for 6. I think, okay, so this might actually have been going through Scott's head earlier, but Scott does have 1 Elixir of Immortality in his deck, so maybe he was under the impression that, you know, the Elixir could keep him from getting decked, but I think since Chihoi is never going to deck himself, by, you know, discarding the Elixir or anything silly like that. You know, Scott did have the pipe dream of being able to just, you know, keep from dying through Elixir, but I mean, the writing was on the wall. He was going to lose eventually, so.
Right. Now, if Scott had some way of interacting with his opponent's Elixir, then maybe I could see not conceding. Like if he had like an exile, right, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can always activate in response. There's no Corrosion Grip. There's nothing with Split Second to really keep you from doing that. If Chihoi made the mistake of like tapping out for an Elixir of Immortality, then maybe. Which, you know, actually I wasn't paying that much attention there at the end, but he might have like played Sphinx Revelation with an Elixir in play, but I don't think he did, because he did see Abrupt Decay from Scott already, and that's like one of the only ways he can lose, I think, is the Sphinx Revelation for a lot, and, you know, accidentally get his Elixir killed. So
right.
From Chihoi, what do we got going on over here?
Well, he has a couple planar cleansings.
That's going to be really good.
Yeah, those will probably be brought in to play against the Sorens, things like that. Intangible Virtues, which he has to suspect that Scott has.
Yeah.
He has 3 Fog if he wants them. Probably not the matchup for him. He'll probably just overload on things like Terminus, Planar Cleansing. He might put the Negates in his deck. I'm not
Yeah, I mean,
Really
he
sure.
saw a ton of instants and sorceries and things, and even planeswalkers from Scott's deck. So the only creatures you saw were Voice of Resurgence, Direct Us. But Counterspell is obviously much worse against Scott when he does have Voice of Resurgence. So that could be something that keeps him from bringing in the negates. The Terminus definitely coming in. Chilo does have a 4th Terminus in the sideboard to go along with the 2 planar cleansing, which should be very good against Scott's deck since he has a bunch of permanents that aren't creatures like Intangible Virtue, Sorin Lord of Innistrad, and Oblivion Ring.
Right. Now, it looks like Chihoy did not really build his sideboard with Scott's deck in mind. He has a lot of cards for the control matchup. He has a lot of cards for the super aggro matchup, but not many for the green mid-range.
Yeah, one of which is one of my favorites, Heroes Reunion.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a little bit of a blast from the past because Heroes Reunion was actually an old Invasion block back in the day, and that was actually one of the first sets that I started playing. And I remember just cracking packs back when I was a kid, and I would just open Heroes Reunion, and I thought it was insane because I've never seen a 2-mana spell gain 7 life before.
It sure looks insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then, you know, they remade it, and I played it in the Turbo Fog for a little while to help out against the burn decks, and it was pretty sweet. So
yeah, I remember back when Heroes Reunion was made, they asked Kai Buddha, they asked him, how much would they have to make a spell that costs 1 white mana? How much life would it have to gain for it to be good? And I think he settled on 10 or more. It had to be 10 or more life
For
for that
1
card to
mana?
be, for 1 mana, yeah.
that's crazy. Well, now, you know, Heroes Union getting a little bit of love now, so maybe Kai was wrong. But back in the day, I mean, I think he was certainly right. I mean, card advantage back in the day was much more important than it is today. You know, we see all these decks of Sphinx Revelation where 1-for-1s just, you know, or sorry, 2-for-1s actually just aren't what you want to be doing. I think one of the best ways to get ahead in Standard is to just play these, you know, haymaker spells like Supreme Verdict that can get a 3-for-1, and then follow that up with a, you know, a Sphinx Revelation to draw like 6 or 8 or, you know, like 12. I think Chihoy drew 12 cards in one turn. So the whole 2-for-1 card advantage aspect of Magic, not really something that you see a lot in Standard because we have cards like Thragtusk, which are virtual 3-for-1s, you know, because the 5 life is super important. Cards like Restoration Angel able to generate an outrageous amount of an advantage. And, you know, the control decks that have a lot of spell removal spells, their game plan, you know, they're not trying to 2-for-1 you, they're trying to 1-for-1 you until they can 8-for-1 you with a Sphinx's Revelation. And that's one of the biggest changes for Magic today than has been in the past. And one of the more interesting aspects of Magic that I really like about Standard right now. It's hard to overcome those big swings.
Yeah, you know, it is. Back when I started playing, if you got a 2-for-1, you were over the moon. It was the best thing in the world.
Dude, I played Afflict in Odyssey block. You know, 3 mana, -1/-1 to a creature, draw a card. That was the stone cold, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was even reprinted in I think 10th edition, and it was good in that one too. So, you know, I'm all about some card advantage. You know, I'll take me a draw 2. Think twice is my jam. But it looks like Scott took a mulligan. I think Chihoy took a mulligan too. So we're both on 6. And Scott's going to be on the play. And it looks like we're ready to go. Overgrown Tomb.
Both players on 6. Chihoy's hand looks pretty weak. He has the Jace in his opener, which he really doesn't want. He has 2 Sphinx's Revelations, which he really doesn't want.
Yep.
It's
and all of his lands are coming into play tapped.
Yeah, ugly opener. He needs a Farseek.
Yep. Brian Brunduin just walked over, and he is 2-0 after defeating Chris Van Meter last round. Do you know if Chris Van Meter won? Nope. All right. Well, of course he did. Okay. Says Glenn Jones. So, yeah, great start for Scott here. Voice of Resurgence into Lingering Souls with basically perfect mana, while Chihoy is just continuing to stumble with his Imton core set duels. Intangible Virtue. That's big game, especially with a Voice of Resurgence in play. So Chihoy's not going to be able to answer this without, you know, serious consequences. That's 6 damage coming in, man.
Chihoy has the Supreme Verdict, but doesn't have the 4th untapped land. Nor can he really.
I mean, he's only taking 6. You know, it's not like he's going to be dead next turn or anything like that. And Scott draws his Elixir of Immortality, which is basically a brick when he's trying to kill his opponent like this.
He slams it though.
Slams it.
Make sure you get that.
He did get decked.
Deck.
He did get decked. I can see where that would be. You know, it would make you feel good to have your card that's really great against those kind of decks. You know. So here comes a Supreme Verdict from Chihoy, but this is still going to leave behind a Voice of Resurgence token. Scott also has a Lingering Souls in the graveyard, which is going to give him, you know, the potential to attack for 4 if he decides to flashback it before combat. So he draws another Intangible Virtue, but I think that's actually just worse than flashing back the Lingering Souls. but we'll see what he decides to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Scott's been pretty careful with not exposing all of his Lingering Souls to, a Supreme Verdict type spell. He's been pretty conservative with them. We'll see how he plays this one.
Right. So another Virtue. I don't dislike that play. He is not exposing himself to another Wrath, which is fine. He gets to attack Chihoy down to 3, which still has a lethal clock in play. Chihoy can just Sphinx's Revelation for 2, going up to 5. But if Scott can see that play, he will flash back Lingering Souls before that happens. So instead, Scott goes for a Sin Collector to not only scope out Chihoy's hand, but to potentially take away one of his answers for whatever he might play. Probably just going to take Sphinx's Revelation here, and then Chihoy's probably just going to Sphinx's Revelation for 2, go up to 5, take 4 damage, go down to 1 life, but draw 2 cards and hopefully find a Supreme Verdict or a Terminus or some way. Oh, there's a Terminus, so that's going to help him interact, but he still has to find another way to deal with the Lingering Souls in the graveyard before he continues.
Right, Chihoy Yim on 1 life, staying alive on the narrowest of margins here.
Yep. And I think Scott should be able to take this game as long as Chihoy doesn't peel something outrageous here. So
I have to imagine we'll see Scott flash back this Lingering Souls, although he just drew a 4th land, so maybe he has a Sorin or something that he'd like to
Yeah, I mean,
as well.
Sorin's probably a little bit better. It is vulnerable to Planar Cleansing from Chihoy, but I think at this point a Planar Cleansing from Chihoy is just going to be outrageously devastating regardless of when he casts it. So.
Right, and also Scott probably doesn't know that Chihoy has Planar Cleansing on the sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, it's not common. He's already seen Terminus and Supreme Verdict, so I guess it's pretty safe to assume Chihoy doesn't have more different kinds of Wraths in his deck, but the fact that he does, it could be a game breaker for the next game should Chihoy lose this one.
Right.
But it looks like he does have 4 mana. He is going to flashback Lingering Souls and play some other spell. Maybe just hold up for Elixir of Immortality.
Yeah, interesting the untap land there. He's
ooh, that's big game. So I think that actually might be enough for Chihoy to stabilize. I don't think... Does Scott have anything for Tomb... Oh, he has Celestial Charm. And he has it in hand. Okay, that's pretty insane. So Chihoy does have Dissipate here, though, to counter the Celestial Charm, but then he also has to deal with an Advent of the Worm on the next turn. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that Chihoy has to be able to deal with. The Plasm Capture that he has in hand, though, can deal with one of them, Dissipate, potentially deal with the other. But Scott can also main phase either of those after the end of turn Celestial Charm, so that Chihoy can't counter both of them.
Right, it's really interesting. That was Chihoy's only draw. He could only rip a Terminus for his draw step there to be able to hold up the counter mana as well.
Well, he did have Dissipate. I think he could have cast Supreme Verdict and then cast Dissipate. Because he had access to 7 mana.
Oh, okay, he did.
So Chihoy decides to Dissipate instead of Plasm Capture, mostly because he doesn't have a whole lot to do with his mana next turn, and he's already gone through 2 Sphinx's Revelations. Although being able to play the Jace for free, or basically for free, would have been a lot better than having to pay 5 for it, because now his Planar Cleansing and stuff are dead. Renounce the Guild's not really what you want to see when your opponent is, destroying you. No, he's not killing your guys, bro. He's just casting a Jace and probably conceding, because I don't think he has an out. But interestingly enough, if he had cast the Plasm Capture here, he could have had a free draw off of the Jace, basically, whereas now, there's no 3-mana spell in his deck that can really deal with the 2 Lingering Souls. So maybe just wants to mill, get a little more information. I think he already played a land this turn, too, so it didn't actually matter.
So Chihoy concedes this one, Scout Bassham on the play with the aggressive draw.
Yep, the voice into Lingering Souls into Intangible Virtue, definitely the kind of game plan he wants. I can understand the thoughts behind Elixir of Immortality, wanting to stay in the deck against the mill deck, but it's not something that I'd really want in a deck like this where, you're just trying to be the aggro deck. Elixir of Immortality, much more of a control-based card.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We saw that Chihoy drew so many board sweepers there. He drew three board sweepers.
Yep, didn't matter.
And, yeah, not at all.
Yeah, even got to Miracle Terminus.
Yeah, he had the Miracle Terminus on the right turn just to stay in the game one more.
Yeah. Fortunately, the Plasm Capture play didn't end up mattering since, actually, does Plasm Capture word at the next main phase?
I think it's your next main phase.
Is it your next main phase? Because if it's the next main phase, then the mana actually would have came in during Scott's turn. So.
Yeah, that would be a weirdly designed card if it was the next. your next pre-combat main
Sure.
phase.
So I think Chihoy definitely should have cast Plasma Capture, but you know, the draw off of the Jace was just a land, so it didn't actually end up mattering. So
right. You know, I like the way that they made the Plasma Capture because now you don't have to worry about announcing second main phase if you want to do something. There's
yes, it's not Carpet of Flowers, which is possibly the most confusing card in the world the way it works. So.
Yeah, and if you guys are unfamiliar with the original Mana Drain, it said at your next main phase. So if you cast a spell in your main phase, they countered, and you countered back, you'd have to use that colorless mana in your second main phase, which is really awkward, and you'd usually end up mana burning.
Oh, so what you're saying is that Mana Drain is not as good as it should be?
Yeah, they should have made it better.
All right, so Chihoy here going to be on the play. Looks like his hand is just all green and white land. Oh no, he has a Hinterland Harbor, but I don't know, that hand didn't seem that bad. He only had one blue source and a Hinterland Harbor, but he had like 4 land, a Wrath, and a Dissipate or something. It didn't seem terrible against Scott's deck. I mean, especially like when Scott's Sin Collectoring him, you can't really afford to mulligan too much. So basically, if you have lands and spells, I think that like maybe you should just keep against this deck because your deck can draw out of a lot of situations.
Right, so it looks like Scott's keeping his 7, Chihoy is going to 6.
Mm-hmm.
So what's Chihoy really looking for in his hand? Farseek, an Urban Evolution?
I think it's more so he just doesn't want to have like lands that don't cast Dissipate.
Right.
Like even though Dissipate's a little awkward against the Voices of Resurgence, Farseek also being pretty good. So this hand I think is going to be pretty sweet and exactly what Chihoy wants. He does have to shock himself with his Watery Grave on 2 because it doesn't make his Sunpetal Grove come into play untapped. But being able to Farseek on 2 hopefully draws into something like Urban Evolution. Again, it's interesting because Chihoy still has Renounce the Guild in his deck, even though it really only kills the Sorens. It only kills half of a Voice of Resurgence, and that's the bad half, honestly.
Right.
Voice of Resurgence.
And it's the same with Sin Collector, kills the bad half of Sin Collector.
Yeah, and I think this is also kind of cool. Chihoy didn't shock himself with the Watery Grave, since he didn't really feel like he needed to cast Farseek on turn 2, since he didn't really have anything to do with 4 mana. If Scott had presented him with a more aggressive clock, I think he would have probably opted to Farseek so he could cast Supreme Verdict or something like that. But without the need to cast Supreme Verdict, there's no need to take 2 damage.
Right, and he basically, in effect, gains 2 life there that a lot of players wouldn't. A lot of players would have slammed the Watery Grave, Farseek, and then just pass on turn 3.
Right. So Scott here, end of turn, Celestial Charm to put some pressure into play, followed by a Sin Collector to hit Chihoy's hand of Sphinx Revelation Terminus. And he takes the Terminus and leaves him with Sphinx's Revelation. So that's bold, Cotton.
Really surprising.
I mean, he has a little bit of pressure, but Chihoy has a ton of Wrath effects, and just giving. I mean, maybe he has another Sin Collector. Like, I don't think we can see Scott's hand very well, and that might have been like the biggest draw. But even if he goes Sin Collector here, he can still Sphinx's Revelation for 2 in response. But I don't know. That seemed a little out of place for me.
Yeah, and interesting, you have to note that Chihoy didn't cast his Farseek that he just drew because he had the same read as you. He figured, well, he must have another Sin Collector if he took my Terminus.
But the shock from Scott indicates, or no, that was Isolate Chapel, I'm sorry. So Scott here holding on to Advent of the Worm, probably going to be casting it end of turn. Chihoy does draw a Fog and also has a Dissipate and a Terminus at the ready, so in a pretty good spot. He actually probably won't counter the Advent of the Worm since he does have the Fog and Terminus in hand. He's probably just going to let Scott cast the Advent of the Worm, cast Fog to prevent, the 9 damage, and then untap and cast Terminus and get a virtual, 2, 3 for 1. Right. I mean, obviously the Sin Collector gained a card, the Fog losing a card, etc. So.
But Chihoy not really concerned about the card advantage like we were talking about earlier. He just wants to survive. He wants to draw another Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, I mean, even Sphinx's Revelation for 2 was huge right there. I mean, he drew into not only a Dissipate for something that could be particularly devastating, but here he can even Dissipate as well as cast Fog. So just in great shape here.
Does pull the trigger on the Fog.
Yep. I mean, he could have soaked 9 down to 5, but I think that's just dangerous against a junk deck that, you don't always know what's in his deck. He could have something like Obsidian or what have you, and then you just leave yourself vulnerable to that, whereas you can prevent 9 damage now. Obsidian, not so scary, but here comes Celestial Charm, not nearly as frightening as an Advent of the Worm. But Scott really needs to turn on the gas here. Chihoi is going to untap with multiple counter spells in hand if he doesn't just play something right now. Looks like he's just passing turn, though. This is the window that Chihoi needed to get back in the game. And there's a Jace, which I believe he can... Oh, nope, he cannot cast that and cast Dissipate. So more than likely going to wait a turn. Probably... or he's going to gamble. Chihoi's a gambling man.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. It looks like the one Jace in his deck, he's just going to slam it. He figures...
Yep.
Oh, Ready Willing milled for Scott.
Yep.
And Chihoi does not find another land.
Ready and willing. What does that card do again?
The ready side untaps all your creatures, makes them indestructible.
Oh, and then the lifelink part, right?
Yeah, I think it's lifelink and death touch, so
Sure.
it's like potential combat blowouts there.
Yeah, so unfortunately for Scott, Chihoi drew a Terminus off of his Jace activation, so now he will likely be able to, just draw some cards with Jace. Oh, there's the Elixir of Immortality. Man, everything's coming up Millhouse.
So Jace up to 6.
Yeah, so here comes a Terminus, although I would not be averse to waiting a turn on this Terminus. Yeah, and I think, okay, so Chihoi's going to do that, where now what this is going to do is even, he's not afraid to cast a Terminus, to cast a Counterspell here and give Scott a token off of his Voice of Resurgence because he's just going to Terminus next turn. So next turn he's going to be able to play his island and then be able to Dissipate as well as cast Terminus, and this is going to prevent Scott from being able to, put any more pressure on the board and, put Chihoi in any trouble.
Yeah, I really like Chihoi's line here. You just keep the counter spell up, make sure you don't lose to something unexpected, next turn pull the trigger with the Dissipate up.
Yep, and so Scott decides to attack Chihoi for 2 and Jace for 2 to keep Jace off of ultimate status. Still has a Brepticane in his deck, which may be a mistake, but he could be afraid of Detention Sphere and things of that nature, so not that surprising, but I can definitely see where you'd want to cut that in this matchup.
Yeah, he had so many cards to cut out. I don't think he could cut all of his removal.
Yeah, so here's a Voice of Resurgence here. You have to counter this because otherwise the rest of your counter spells are just going to get turned off. Well, Chihoi has different plans in mind, I guess. Maybe he's not that afraid of it, but I mean, you do have, 2 counter spells in hand, and the Voice basically turns those off, so I'm not really sure why he would just let that resolve. But now he Urban Evolutions, can potentially cast a Supreme Verdict, gets to play an extra land, 1 Explore. I'm going to say that a lot, I'm sorry.
The Urban Evolution is just so powerful. I love seeing anyone cast that spell. I loved casting it in Limited, and to see it in Constructed, it's so much fun.
Yeah. So Chihoi opting to just build his mana up a lot. He's, again, probably not that concerned with all the things going on from Scott's side. Although the end of turn Celestial Charm here is interesting because Chihoi can counter that, and Scott doesn't get a token. So we'll see what he does. I guess he just opted to let it happen as is. So here comes in 4 damage, 2 at Jace and 2 at Chihoi again.
How do you feel about this attack, the split attack that Scott's been doing?
I mean, it can be dangerous, but sometimes you can just deck yourself, or get yourself decked by Jace's ultimate ability, if you're not careful.
Right.
All right, so Advent of the Warren, end of turn. So Chihoi actually has Alchemist Refuge here, so he's not in any bad shape at all. He can Alchemist Refuge and a Supreme Verdict. That's going to give a token trigger to the Voice of Resurgence, but the trigger will resolve before the Supreme Verdict, and then all the creatures will die, and then Scott will just be left with the Singleton Voice token.
So if you're just joining us right now, I'm Jack Hall. And
I'm Todd Anderson.
And we're coming to you live from the Star City Open Series here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yep.
This is round 2.
Yes, round 2. Chihoi Yim looks like he's in control of this game. He has Alchemist Refuge plus Supreme Verdict. Unfortunately, Scott decided to main phase the Thragtusk before attacks, which, I mean, is, it's maybe he just wants to try to bait out counter spells, get a few voice tokens. He's going to be left now with a voice token and a Thragtusk token, so not like a terrible board position, but Chihoi is just drawing a ton of cards with Urban Evolution, a ton of cards with Jace, Memory Adept, and still at a reasonably healthy 8 life. It's lower than you would like, but I think that he's pretty safe with his options. Like, he can even play Snapcaster Mage here, flashback a Sphinx's Revelation. I feel like he's got good control.
Yeah,
so,
and, this Jace Memory doing its best Phyrexian Arena impersonation here.
And so Chihoi, now he's just going to use the Mill 10 ability from Jace, probably in consecutive turns, along with Snapcaster Mage with Fog, Snapcaster Mage with Sphinx Revelation, Snapcaster with Supreme Verdict, so... Yep, so he decides to main phase Snapcaster Supreme Verdict so he doesn't have to waste his 2 mana from Alchemist Refuge, and it leaves him more options with his Dissipate and Plasm Capture. So here comes Lingering Souls, probably going to get dissipated. What do you think?
Yeah, that's about the best Dissipate target in the deck, I'd say.
Yeah, so a pretty sweet one.
And I think at this point Chihoi has kind of realized that Scott didn't have any big sideboard card that he was bringing in, just a lot of value cards.
Yeah,
and that.
I mean the Sin Collector was pretty huge. I mean, I think if he had taken the Sphinx Revelation, ultimately the Revelation ended up only being for 2, but it was still pretty good. Chihoi here with another Urban Evolution, and it's pretty much game over now. He's just going to mill him for 10 for the rest of the game. Here comes, 2 Sphinx Revelation, sure, sure, buddy.
Plasm Capture too. Yeah. So counter, Fog, draw. Scott's options really going away fast here.
Agreed. All right, so it takes one of the Sphinx Revelations, a noble venture.
Yep. And at the end of turn, I bet Chihoi will... No, he doesn't even draw cards.
Yeah, well, no reason to. Just gonna mill you. Just gonna see what you do. Don't want to tap out because he wants to make sure his Plasm Captures can counter anything.
Right.
Doesn't want his Jace to die. Doesn't, and he's already milled over the Elixir, but I'm sure he doesn't know whether or not Scott maybe has a second Elixir or something like that. So there's no reason to Sphinx Revelation when you can just hold up for a double Plasm Capture. Like tapping out, I think, is the only way he can actually lose the game.
Well, we see a flashback Lingering Souls here. Yep. I don't think Chihoi is going to have anything to say about it.
Yeah, probably not. So the Drown Yard along with Jace, I think, should be lethal next turn because it's 16 more cards, and he's already milled 20. And the game, has gone on for a reasonable amount of time. So,
yep, there it is.
There's the handshake. All right, so Chihoi M ends up 2-0 with his sweet bad control deck. It's a little boring to watch